All right. Hello and welcome everyone to our weekly Power Lounge. This is your place to hear authentic conversations from women in digital who have power to share. My name is Amy Vaughan, and I am the owner and chief empowerment officer of Together Digital, a diverse and collaborative community of women who work in digital and choose to share their knowledge, power, and connections. You can learn more about us at www.togetherindigital.com. And today, our guest is an entrepreneur and community builder, Kiley Peters. Kiley Peters. Hi, Kiley. This isn't the first time we've met, but I clearly have a fake brain already. She believes that business owners need to build their business in alignment with their personal goals and values to truly live their most fulfilling life. And I love how good that sounds. And I want that for all of you who are listening now and in the future when the podcast airs. She's going to talk about and share her methodology and how she uses it to help owners define success for themselves, along with her own personal journey, because we always love hearing the career journeys and stories of other women because we find them informative and inspiring. Kiley is a serial entrepreneur, a national speaker, small business strategist, executive coach, operations consultant, brand maker, and fellow podcast host. She is on a mission to help 1 million women achieve financial freedom and build fulfilling lives. She is the founder of Brainchild Studios, an international and award-winning digital content strategy agency, and RainIX, an executive consultancy for women business owners. In the name of supporting entrepreneurship, she has also launched the Starter Kit, which we'll discuss maybe a little bit today, a series of online courses built at emerging entrepreneurs through the steps of starting their own small business. You can also join her and listen to her weekly podcast, Welcome to Aloma, which I had the pleasure of being on with you a few months back, but it's so good to have you here with us now in the lounge.
Thank you for having me.
Of course, of course. I feel like being I would say a relatively new entrepreneur, having worked in agencies and for other companies for 14, 15 years. There's absolutely many amazing and liberating things about becoming an entrepreneur, but also many terrifying new things that you need to approach. And so what I loved about everything that you're doing, whether it's the podcast, Welcome to Aloma, RainIX, all of that, it is really about leveraging that power and ability when you are creating your own business to also give your space the permission and the room and the liberation that you could not get from being employed by someone else. So I'm excited to have you share a little bit about your path and journey and how you came into this work in particular, and particularly this mission to help women.
Yeah. Well, it's been a journey. First, thank you for having me. It's lovely to be here. Yeah, it's been a journey. And I love entrepreneurship, and that's kind of why I've decided to take the path I am with Rain9 moving forward. But I've been an entrepreneur. It's so funny. A couple years ago, I had this moment of like on National Entrepreneur Day or whatever it was, one of the days. And I looked back on my journey as an entrepreneur and I was like, wow, I think I've been doing this since I was like 5.
Yeah.
But like never realized it. I was never given the language or the title to say, this is what I'm doing, and when you think about an entrepreneur, and not that I have like the definition in front of me right now, but it's you're creating something and you're selling it, right? So I think back about my journey, like I like many kids did the lemonade stands and the cookie stands and like made stuff and sold it, right? But I also, and like I attribute a lot of my entrepreneurial mindset, I guess, to my mom. And she would never consider herself an entrepreneur, but she was the one that like taught me to create stuff and sell it. Like we used to create quote unquote stress balls in like 4th grade. Like what are you stressed out about in 4th grade? But we would like take water balloons and fill them with flour and then like sell them for like $0.25. We're part of the Beanie Baby craze. And so we would create Beanie Baby leashes and sleeping bags and like sell, like $0.25 was like a really big ticket item. Like I wanted to collect quarters. So like everything was $0.25 back in 4th grade.
That's a lot of money. Great. At least
Yeah, and like it's a sizable coin, everyone loves quarters. Um, I used to sew for my mom's friend. Like my mom sewed for my mom's friend. She taught me to sew. And like, that was my first like contractor gig without a contract.
yeah.
So when we think about entrepreneurship for anybody here and anybody listening, like it doesn't have to have such a specific title,
Right.
right? I think when we break it down, it kind of just comes to a state of being,
Mhm.
like I create and I sell. And
Mhm.
again, I don't know if that's the official definition of entrepreneur, but that's what I'm going to work with right now. And so we think about that. And then like when I was like 18, I started graphic design
Mhm.
and I started my first unofficial freelance gig, right? So I've been doing freelance work since I was 18,
Mhm.
over half of my life. And from there, it just kind of moved forward. And I was always doing side gigs, even when I had full-time quote unquote corporate jobs and working
Yeah.
for agencies and client side, et cetera.
Yeah.
Um, and I came into this world of official, we'll call it official entrepreneurship. When I started Brainchild Studios in 2016, at the time, like I built my career in digital marketing, and in the name of like, do what you know, it was, well, yeah, I know digital marketing and I know all kinds of facets of digital marketing. And I'm so sick of everybody being like, I know social media. So social media is the thing you should do. Or
Yeah.
I know ads. So that is the thing you should do. And it's like, that's not true. And like, there's a better way to be doing this, guys. And then the whole, before COVID came about, we'd been virtual since day one because I was always like, I need a Wi-Fi connection and a laptop to do my job. Like, I don't need to spend 2 hours commuting into an office. I don't need you to like micromanage me. So there's a lot of things that went into my entrepreneurial journey. But I knew that when I started Brainchild, I wanted to do something that meant something to me. And I wanted to do something that was going to create opportunities for women that I wanted for myself that I wasn't seeing at the time. And so for me, again, that looks like the flexibility and the freedom.
Yeah.
And so and now this is not true for all professions. Like if you're a nurse, generally speaking, you probably need to be touching a patient, right? But in a lot of professions, especially those driven by technology, that's not the case. And it took COVID hitting us
Mhm.
to flip that mindset for a lot of people. And so I think on this quote unquote other side of COVID, if that's where we want to talk about,
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not going to get into that, but um people have shifted their mindset into what is really available. And so at the time when I started Brainchild, that was not the case. So I was like, I want to create a flexible work-life structure for women to have their cake and eat it too, and have fulfilling careers and strong families and pursue personal growth. And yes, I believe that that is possible. And I think we leverage technology and laptops and Wi-Fi and the wonderful communication skills that women are so good at, and we make it happen. And we
Mhm.
did. And we did quite successfully for the last 6 years. We won international awards. We built an amazing culture. We've had contractors and employees from all over the country. It's been an incredible journey. But for me, over the last 2 years, what I realized is my love and passion for marketing that was once there is not necessarily there anymore. And so I was starting to feel, I've been talking about this recently, the analogy of like your foot is in the boat and one other foot is on the dock and it's starting to drift. And you
Mhm.
either have to hop one direction or you're going to fall straight into the water.
Yeah.
Um, and 2021 for me was a lot of, I'm just going to fall straight into the water because what happened for me was I realized my deep love for entrepreneurship and that I'm pretty good at running the business piece. And I really, and all the women entrepreneurs that I've met, they're all so wildly talented in their own ways. But a lot of them were struggling with the running of the business piece. And I was like, I love this stuff. Like, I can help with this. I can help with this. And this would light me up. And this is like aligns with my why.
Yep.
And so at the beginning of 2021, I started Rain 9 to focus on doing side consulting as I was like, I'm just going to explore this. And then it just took off so much faster and bigger than I was prepared for. And so I
Mhm.
very much felt very torn. And so we just announced in the very beginning of November 2022, it's been a 12-month exit strategy, but we just announced that Brainchild will be closing down at the end of this year so that I can go all in with Rain 9 And my team is joining me from Brainchild to Rain 9. They're very excited about this. And the goal with that is to support as many women, especially women entrepreneurs and small business owners, in pursuing what success looks like to them, building the life that they want for themselves, reminding them that it's important to first get clear on what that is for yourselves, and then not being afraid to ask for help in building the business that you want. And that you should also feel free to build the business that you want. It doesn't need to look like what anyone else decides it should look like. And that was something that I struggled with for a long time. And so I warmly and welcome that message and share that message with everybody, because success is a very personal definition. And I think we forget that oftentimes. And that was like such a long-winded answer, Amy.
No, it was
And I hope that was okay.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely fantastic. I loved how you opened up with the statement and the thought, sentiment, whatever you want to call it, that entrepreneurship is a state of being. I think a lot of women who are listening to this can think back to a time in which they were, especially at a young age, entrepreneurial, but they didn't have that language to call themselves that. I
Yeah.
was that kid. I was working the neighborhood for babysitting gigs and helping coordinate groups and communities to help clean up the neighborhood, save the planet, things like
Yes.
that. At
Oh my
like
gosh. Sorry, not to get you, but yes, I was in second grade. I literally thought I could save the manatees and Siberian tigers. And I like with crayon drew posters and put them on the walls of my elementary school. And I was like, I can do this. Okay. I
We'd
did
have been
nothing.
such good friends in school. We would have totally saved the world together.
I was like very nerdy. I was never ever the cool kid. I'm totally fine with that.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, I think in your example, you definitely stayed the course. I kind of fell into the shoulds of whatever else society, family, friends said, this is how you look, feel, sound successful, is by going and doing all these things. It wasn't until I was in my mid to late 30s and joined Together Digital and got the opportunity to run the business that I was like, what, this feels like the thing I should have been doing all along. And if I look back to how I behaved as a child, even in the fourth grade, I remember learning about free enterprise and being really excited about it. What fourth grader is excited about free enterprise?
That's
Clearly
amazing.
that needs to work either in economics or business.
Yeah.
So I love that. I love that backstory, and I love that it's been a thread throughout. And then also, again, to reinforce the entrepreneurship as a state of being, even what you described in the pivot of your business and what it is like, in trying to make that decision to like leverage your entrepreneurship like as a state of being to move your business either forward or to sell it. But I think that is what I'm excited about today's conversation is a lot of times I think as women, we are told over and over and over again that we need to have it all, do it all, be it all. But obviously we don't and we can't. And so it's less about having it all and more about having what you want, which is why, again, this conversation is so great. But then you ask a lot of women, what do you want? And because we get so seldom to get asked that question, it's like deer in headlights because we don't know.
It really is.
No,
it really is. And women so often are such givers, right? And like, I'm not trying, trust me, I'm the last person that's trying to like put women in a box right now. But just generally speaking, we are a nurturing being and are usually trying to take care of everybody else and seldom take the time to reflect on that for ourselves. And so not that anyone needs permission for this, but if you feel like you do, which you don't, but if you feel like you do, please use this as permission to like take time right now or this weekend or whenever you're listening to this, take time for yourself and figure out like what you really want. And know that it's okay. And like, I do think you can have it all, but I think it's the definition of what is all and at what time. Like, I know my team, my poor team, they'll be like, Kiley, can you just slow down? Like, instead of launching 12 initiatives at once, could we like launch them over a few quarters? So like, I also bring that to this conversation. Like, ladies, you can have it all, but like, figure out what that timeline might look like.
Right. Once it's
it might not be right now, but you can get there. Let's just figure out what those steps are. And I just want to clarify real quick, Amy, I have not always been graced with this mindset. I definitely fall prey to what I should do, or how I should look, or how I should think, or what I should say and what I shouldn't say and how I shouldn't, like, I had ex-boyfriends that told me that I wasn't ladylike or nurturing enough. And it was like a whole thing. I could get so far into that. So I just like saying this out there. If anyone's like, oh, I'm beating myself up, you're not alone. We've all done that. And like,
Exactly.
it's okay. It's your own journey. Like, but know that you deserve that. You
Yeah,
deserve to get to that point.
I agree. And on that note of us being inclined to be givers, it is the way we are socially conditioned. It's not
Yeah.
just a gender stereotype. It is because of gender stereotypes and systems that exist. Our last second to last episode we just did was so we did EQ and leadership last episode. The episode before that was about human giver syndrome. And it's this notion that the value that we are given as humans, not as human beings, but as human givers, and our ability to make other people happier and more comfortable. And because we're still trying to break down those generational and societal stereotypes, it's really hard because that's what we've learned from other models, from parents, from aunts, grandmas, you name it, to kind of fall into this. So, I mean, you shouldn't feel guilty or ashamed if you sit down and you're like, I don't know immediately what I want. When I ask myself, what do I want? But you're never going to get what you want unless you sit down, take the time, ask yourself the
And
questions
name it.
and name them. Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree.
There's a lot of science behind like I don't know what the exact stats are, but when you take the time to write down your goals, you are significantly more likely to achieve them. And when you share them with other people, you are also more likely to achieve them. So ladies, write it down and then tell people.
As we're always saying, manifest and put it out into the universe. There's
Get
like
it out there. Yeah.
I agree. And then right towards the end, also, you did a great like lead in. So I want to bring us back into this idea of success.
Yeah.
And you read people's bios and you're always like, wow, she sounds so successful. And you come across as very accomplished and very successful. Kiley, you know what you're doing, you know how to do it, you get it done. So I'm curious, again, that's outside perspective. From an inward standpoint, how do you define success? What is success for you? Bio and resume aside.
Yeah. Well, thank you. That's very sweet. But peek behind the curtains. I have no idea what I'm doing. Like, I've got a lot of plans. I've got a lot of spreadsheets. I've got a lot of dreams. I've got a lot of notebooks. I've got a lot of notes in my phone. I've got a lot of moving pieces. But it's a lot of build the plane while you're flying it. Yeah. And I just have been really, really grateful and lucky and fortunate to have enough people believe in me flying a half-built plane that are willing to like jump into those seats and like really strap on their seatbelts. And they're like, it'll be fine. This is going to be great. And to all of those people, I'm so grateful. But defining success is definitely something that it's taken me a long time to figure out. And my hope is that in the work that we're doing now, it doesn't take women as long to figure it out, because I've done the work to find the language and some of the exercises and like really reflected a lot on what my process has been to get to this point to help hopefully expedite that for other women. But to answer your question, what does it look like for me? It looks like freedom and autonomy, and I say that, and that's for me. Anyone can define that however they want. But for me, it's freedom of time and money so that I can live my life how I want. And that doesn't mean that I'm looking to be a bajillionaire. It just means that I want to do the things that are important to me. The concept of space has become really important for me over the last couple of years. And again, you can define that as a lot of things. If you listen to my podcast, Welcome to Iloma, every episode starts with, this is a space where we talk about this thing. Because this concept of space has become really, really important to me. Because I feel, again, this is just my journey, I need space to think and build and create. And that is also something that is necessary for me in my personal definition of success. Like that's just core and innate to who I am. So to create that space to write or to walk and think, and, even on my calendar, like there are days where I'm like, don't book anything Because if
Right.
there's like an end point, like if I get on a roll and I know that I have to stop at a certain point, I'm screwed.
Yeah.
Like I just need to be able to go. I need the space, right?
Yeah.
And then I would also say like fulfillment and intention are really, really important to me. And I say that in terms of the work I do, in the relationships that I choose, in the way
Yeah.
that I spend my time, and the way I spend my money. Like I've recently decided that if I'm going to be forced, not forced, but if am given the opportunity to make a significant investment in my health, I'm
Mhm.
going to make it. Like that's
Right.
just something I've decided. I'm like, this
Yeah.
is the best thing I can invest in right now.
Absolutely.
And so those things, so especially when it comes to the fulfillment and intention, that's been a huge driving force in making the decision to go all in with Rain 9. Um, and also the 100 Collective in terms of wanting to support masses of women to whatever degree we're able to. Um, I've also gotten much better. I think like 20 something Kylie would be patting me on the back of saying no to toxic relationships. Like I'm not one of those people that has 50 best friends.
Right.
And
Yeah.
I'm okay with that. Like
Yeah.
I just got married like October 1st and I think thank you. We had a pretty intimate wedding. It was like mostly family, but I invited 4 friends.
Mhm.
And I was like, these are my 4 favorite ladies in my life. And
Yeah.
I'm good with that, and I'm just intentional with
Mhm.
the decisions that I make.
That makes a lot of sense. And it makes me really excited for everyone who's listening because I think you're already just starting to lay out some nice groundwork, which we can get into even more here soon. But, I think one of the benefits of taking the time to reflect and define what success looks like for you. And again, not maybe the materialistic, it's maybe spiritual, maybe it is financial, like whatever that is that's driving you.
Yeah.
Plus knowing what it is that you want short-term, long-term. I tell you what, decisions become a whole hell of a lot easier because like you were just
Oh my
saying,
God.
like, the choice between Rain 9 and Brainchild, like you might have agonized over that for so long, but if you have that work and you have that grounding and trust within yourself of that, so one of my favorite mantras is you have knowing. I think I doubt sometimes, like I'm a
I like
very
that.
collaborative worker. I love to get consensus. I'll even ask my daughter, like, these earrings or these earrings. So decision making is fatiguing for me. So I definitely
Yes.
am very conscious of that. So a lot of this earlier work really helps me when it comes time to make critical decisions, make those decisions because the path has been laid.
Yeah. And you touched on such an important thing that I think even deserves a little extra space here is decision fatigue is very real.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very real. So like for women, we have so many freaking decisions we make every single day as business owners and entrepreneurs. Holy crap. I love my husband so dearly, but in the morning, like when I've just woken up, he almost always asks me, "What do you want to have for dinner tonight?" And I'm like,
Oh,
"Oh
that
my
pisses me
God,
off, doesn't it? It makes
I
me mad
love you
too.
so much." But I have like 12,000 million decisions to make before I think about dinner tonight. Um, but it's very real. It's very real. Decision fatigue is real. So don't think it's like because you can't hack it or
No.
because it's Friday and it's the end of the long day. Like it's a real thing.
And it's not that you don't know what you want. It's just, again, not having, like you said, that space to
Yeah.
kind of make a decision. It's easy to just surrender all of your choices to everyone and everything else.
Or make very bad ones.
Yeah, that too.
Like that's honestly, that's what happened for me at the end of 2021.
Oh yeah.
I just started making like, well, I make rapid fire decisions pretty quick all the time, but I started making like bad ones. And I
Mm.
said to my team, I was like, all right, guys, no more decisions for me. Like I'm taking a decision-making timeout because I'm not making good ones. And they were
That's
like, okay, go away now. Bye. Like just, just stop, Kylie. I was like,
amazing.
got it. We're all on the same page. Got it. Okay.
That's amazing. So one more quick question on the success, because I also wanted to
Yeah.
plug the Rain 9 Defining Success workshop that you have coming up. What
Oh,
are
great.
some ways that, again, as women, we get conditioned as to what ideal success looks like? Thank you, social media. How do you help other people, if you're like not defining success for yourself, how do you help others begin to define success? And then obviously you don't have to give it all away. So they'll check out hopefully your workshop. For our live
Yeah.
listeners, is in the chat in case you've missed it. Listeners in the podcast, it will include it in the show notes.
Yeah. Well, if you are interested, you can go to RIX workshops.com. We have all the information there. But yeah, so essentially what we've done is, as we've been talking about defining success, we've labeled the core of the work that we do our defining success workshop series. And we do that in both one-on-one. So just me or a facilitator working directly with you, or a group setting, depending on what works best for your budget, really. And what you're looking to get out of it and how long you want to wait for a group workshop. But the way we go about it is, first and foremost, we leave everything that you think you're supposed to do and know and think behind.
Nice.
You can just like leave that outside. And then we go through depending on if you do one-on-one or our group workshops, it's a 2 or 3 part series. So the first part, as you mentioned, Amy, at the very beginning, is we believe that owners need to define success for themselves first as a human before we jump into the business. So we go through a set of carefully curated exercises and questions to get really, really clear on what it looks like for the owner to define success for themselves. And when I say that, I mean like time. What does success look like for you in terms of time?
Love that. That's
And
great.
in terms of activities, what do you want to be doing? What should you not be doing? The things, like what things do you want? What experiences do you want? What people do you want? What does it look like in terms of success for finances, short-term and long-term? And how are we going to get there, right? What growth opportunities do you want as a human being, right? And then we really dive into a lot of where your energy is being spent. We just talk about decision fatigue, and we know that there's a lot on women's plates, and it's okay to delegate. It's necessary to delegate. And so we go into all of that and get really clear on what success looks like for you as an individual. And then the second part of the workshop is we work on developing a business strategy to align with your personal definition of success. And so we go through, if you haven't already done the work on mission, vision, values, goals for the business, we go through that with you. We get really clear on what your audience looks like. And I don't mean like 25 to 35-year-old white women in the suburbs of Detroit. I mean, what are their values? What are their motivators? What are their behaviors online and offline? What are their conversion triggers? What happened that made them need to buy from you or call you or whatever? And then demographics get layered in there. And then from there, we go into, okay, great. So we know exactly who they are. We know what you want to be doing. Now, what problems are you solving for these people, or what aspirations are you helping them achieve? And what is that Venn diagram of that overlap to help show you what your productized services should look like? And what are the details of that? And then what are the numbers behind that to make sure you're making a profit on the work that you're doing? And then we go into financial projections, because you can't run a profitable business if you don't know what your numbers are. And they can be very scary for a lot of people. So we try to make them less scary. And then we develop roadmaps to make sure that you have an actionable game plan to move forward. And then in our one-on-one opportunity, we do continued quarterly check-ins to make sure you have accountability buddies, me, to make sure that you're doing the work that you need to be doing to move forward. So that's our defining success workshop series. And that's kind of how we are approaching going about it. And then from there, it's a matter of streamlining your internal operations to make sure that you're being mindful of your time, and then minding your community and your resources, because you don't need to be doing this alone. And we all go further together. So that's how we go about it.
I love it. That sounds fantastic. And it leads nicely into that next question of this idea that I think a lot of us female entrepreneurs tend to fall into, is that, and even if you're still working for somebody, is that we have not just have it all, we have to do it all. It's really hard to delegate. It's really hard to trust that others that we bring in will do the work to the standards, the quality, and the speed in which we will do it.
Yeah.
So when it comes to designing your business for the life that you want, where the hell do you even start when it comes to beginning to delegate?
Yeah.
And bring others in?
Well, I'll go back to kind of what I mentioned in the last question is I really think it comes down to defining success for yourself first.
Yeah.
Because and it's been my experience and it's also been the experiences of the clients that I've worked with. It's hard to delegate when you can't first get really clear on exactly where you want to be spending your time and energy. So one of the exercises we go through is about allocating energy. Which sounds like really woo woo, but I'm not like a crystal woo woo person. And it's fine if you are, just not my jam. Not judging. But energy is a real thing, right? You know, we talk about the activities and the things that we do that give us energy and the things that drain our energy. And, you know, why not optimize your time and energy in doing the things that are giving to you versus draining? And guess what? The good news is that the things that are draining to you are giving to someone else.
Yeah.
So, but it's hard to name that if you can't actually write it down. So I would go with, again, you know, we define success for ourselves through this series of exercises and activities. And then our belief is, again, you have to build your business to align with that definition of success for you as a human. So then aligning that business strategy to that personal definition of success. And I know that might sound like a vague statement, but just to give an example, so one of the things that I mentioned that I want, how I define success, is I need space to create and I want freedom and autonomy. So one thing that I don't want is to be held responsible on a 24/7 basis to client needs,
Mhm.
which is like if anybody's ever run an agency,
That's the reason I don't run an
that's
agency.
a fun game to play. So that was one of the things I was like, this isn't going to work for me anymore. So the way I've developed my service offerings with Ray 9 is workshop based. I love doing the deep work.
Yeah.
Like I could get going, like you start me at 3 o'clock on a Friday. And if I have nothing to do, I could work until midnight and like get really good stuff. Like I love that work. And so that was something that I had to discover about myself and figure out how to pack this into an offering. So we talk about these 3-day workshops. It's intensive work.
Yeah.
You're going to be exhausted by the end of it, but you're hopefully also going to be energized. And
Mhm.
I developed this because this is the work I want to be doing, right? Like this is what gives me energy and this is how I best work. And we do these in these intensive workshops versus like, hey, I'm going to check in with you every single day for the next 6 months.
Yeah.
That would kill me.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's going to drain my energy. But we pack it all into these intense workshops.
Yeah.
That's life-giving for me, right?
Mhm.
Now, if it was somebody else, maybe they would build out a different program that would align with their definition in a different way, right? But that's just one example. And then designing what that roadmap looks like to make sure that you are building it out. Earlier, I was like, oh, I have 12 different initiatives I want to launch. Okay, well, we are launching them over like quarters, right?
Right.
Quarters tend to be like nice chunks of time to plan for. And then the other thing that we're doing right now, and I would recommend to all businesses, is taking the time to streamline those internal operations. So we're making some pretty significant investments right now in operations, and then mining that community. So mining your resources, one of the things that I just mentioned to somebody the other day, it was like, okay, so this is what you want to do. Great. What do you need? What resources do you need to do that? Okay, great. What do you already have? Okay, great. What don't you have? Those are the things that we need to go find.
Mhm.
And you're
Right.
going to surprise yourself because you probably have more than you think you know.
Mhm. Yeah.
Mine your community and mine your resources because you're not starting from square one. I don't care who you are or where you're coming from. Like you have more than you think you have already. It's
Mhm.
just a matter of looking at that. So what I just listed there is actually our process. So it's define, align, design, streamline, and mine.
Nice. Nice. I
Little
love it.
branding
Yeah.
hat there.
I love
That's
it.
where I would start. Start with
Yeah.
you.
Former copywriter. It all is awesome. And I think that might answer that next question even, the question is going to be, what are some common roadblocks and misconceptions in running a business that make it difficult to live the life that you want? And I think the things that you mentioned there is not conserving, reserving, or observing your energy,
Oh,
which
I
is
like that.
great. Again, it's the copywriter Amy coming out. And
Nice.
she just dropped in the chat for us a MailChimp article that was talking about energy management versus time management. So we were just literally talking about this this morning in our Slack group for Together Digital. It is, again, something that I agree. So your energy, what are there any other roadblocks that you feel like maybe we didn't touch on? They're the ones that you've seen from other women that you've helped coach?
Yeah. I mean, unfortunately, I think the list is probably
Much
endless.
longer.
We could talk about this forever.
Another episode, one question.
Yeah, one question. What do we all run into? I mean, very tactically, I think one of the roadblocks that we run into is cash flow and the misunderstanding of money and tax strategy.
Yes.
I'll say, like, it took me a long time to figure that out. And now I'm like nerding out so hard on it because tax strategy is like so sexy to me, which
Mhm.
is a weird thing to say. But it's true.
Well, you
But
said
I
getting ready to jump on the call today that you just had a really fun and exciting conversation with your accountant. And I mean, you don't put those
true.
things in sentence together. So,
I know, like fun, sexy accounting, tax.
right?
Yeah, I know. It's like, who would have thought? But I do say that I say that in jest, but also very seriously too, because I firmly believe like you cannot run a successful company, however you define success, successful or profitable company, if you don't know what your numbers are. And again, so often, and it's human nature, like you don't like something, so you avoid it, right? Or you don't understand it, so you avoid it. Don't
Yeah.
avoid your numbers. Please don't avoid your numbers, because that's what gets people into trouble. And I say this as like I did this myself. Like I'm embarrassed to admit, but my very first year in business, two embarrassing stories. We signed the largest client that we ever signed in less than the first 12 months of business at Brainchild Studios. And that client is still a client today. So it's been an incredible relationship, but I forgot in putting together the SOW for a full 12 months to account for my own time.
Oh
So
no.
for 12 months on a huge account, I worked for free.
Oh,
Let me
yeah.
tell you about not creating a profitable business, doing work for free. Don't do that. And simultaneously, I also completely forgot about setting aside money to pay taxes.
Mhm.
I had when tax time came around, I had I think it was like a $4,200 like I owed. And
Mhm.
I was like, okay, well, I don't know where I'm gonna get this money from. So I put it on a credit card.
Oh,
Yeah. And then I spent like the next 9 months trying to pay off that credit card.
right. Paying
So like,
interest on it.
yeah, that was, it's like a cheeky 25% interest. It was like
Yeah.
terrible. So
Yeah.
I say this like as I'm not judging anyone. I've done this myself. And then cash flow is king. Like if you don't have cash,
Mhm.
then in some cases you run into legal issues. Like you have to legally pay your team. So you have to know your money.
Yeah.
And then I would say the other things that I've noticed very specifically are lack of delegation. We've talked about that a lot already. But you have to let go. You have to, because your best use of your time and energy is not being used when you're not delegating things. I'd also say lack of self-awareness.
Yeah. That's a great one.
And yeah, like lack of self-awareness. Like sometimes we get in our own ways and we're just so blind to it on so many levels, emotionally, physically, mentally, business, like all things. And I'd also say, unfortunately, lack of confidence and self-worth.
Yes.
So many women and women business owners that I've encountered struggle to believe in themselves in the ways that they should. And I think it's fair. Well, I don't want to make a blanket statement, but a lot of us, myself included, suffer from imposter syndrome. And then we start to second guess ourselves. And then we start to second guess our rates. And then we start to second guess our profit margins. And we start to second guess all of the decisions that we've already made that have fatigued us. Right. Like, so it's a constant cycle. And I think all those things get in our way. And what I would encourage everybody to really take time to evaluate is your mindset.
Mhm.
Because I think that can be the solution to a lot of these things, but it is a muscle that has to get worked.
Mhm.
Right. So the difference between the scarcity mindset and an abundance mindset,
Mhm.
between like total control and letting go,
Mhm.
the mindset of like, this is happening for me, not to me,
Yes. Mhm.
like that kind of stuff. And again, I know it sounds like all woo, 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 but
That makes
it
sense.
changes the game, man. like I have this Post-it note right here. I'll pull it up for anybody who's watching. I don't think you can read it, but it says 2022 will be the best year of my life.
Mhm.
And I say that because 2021 was, I don't want to say be dramatic and be like the worst year of my life, but like, man, it was probably one of
Yeah.
the worst years of my life. And so I came into this year and I was like, this year's going to be amazing.
Mhm.
And it has.
Yeah.
And we talk about manifesting and it's like, yeah, I think it's real.
Yeah, it is real. I think even anything that feels and seems a little woo-woo, it's there for a reason. Or even if it's cliche for a reason. There's some element of truth to that. And I
Yeah.
100% agree with you. I think entrepreneurship for me personally has helped me grow exponentially in my self-awareness. And, there's no shame in looking back at decisions you've made and who you were and just letting that be because it's in the past. So, and I also love
Yeah.
that you brought up mindset because mindfulness and mindset, just between everything we've all collectively dealt with over the last 2.5, 3 years, plus running a very mission-based business. Again, like you need to take care of you. Again, another cliche, oxygen mask first on you.
Yeah.
You can't take care of everybody else if you're starving for air. So I appreciate you sharing the money mistakes and the times when you felt like you were being like an imposter, because again, we've all been there, or we
Yep.
all are going to make those mistakes, and that's how we're going to learn.
Mhm.
But by you being open and vulnerable, I know our listeners who are live with us were just adding into the chat how much they appreciated your honesty.
Oh, well, yes, absolutely. My pleasure. My pleasure. I'm sure I'm going to misquote this, but I was just talking to somebody or heard something recently. We're not, none of us are doing anyone any favors by
Mhm.
pretending to not be our authentic self or by not being our authentic self.
Mhm.
Because, like whatever we're not, and again, vulnerability is a sensitive thing, but I think it's also a strength and a power. But it takes time. It takes time
Yeah.
to get to whatever level you feel comfortable. But if we had find the strength to be 100% exactly who we are and own it, we are only helping at somebody else.
Right.
Right? Like when we hold back and we don't share like, "Oh, I did this thing, but I was really embarrassed about it. I don't want anyone to know." Somebody else is going to do that thing. And like they might do it anyway, but at least you put it out there and you let them know like you're not alone, or maybe like don't do this, or like I don't know, don't hire a terrible accountant, or like don't go through legal Zoom. Like, I got a whole list of things.
Yeah.
But yes, it's my pleasure to be open and honest and happy to do so.
Yeah, I mean, again, like I said, we only learn through failures, and sometimes they're our own and sometimes they're what we've seen others do, you know?
Learnings. Yeah,
Learning. It's all
learnings.
learnings.
I
Exactly.
think it's a failure if you screw it up and then you screw it up again
Yeah.
and again
Keep going
and
the
again.
same over and over
Yeah,
again.
keep
Yeah.
making the same mistake. Otherwise, it's like, wow, okay, didn't know that one, but now I do. Okay.
Yep,
Yeah,
I totally agree. Okay, we're coming close to time, and I want to make sure our live audience has time to ask you questions because I feel like they're going to have some.
sure.
So I'm going to skip ahead a couple questions, and I want to ask about what advice would you give to someone who is burnt out running their own business?
Oh boy.
I feel like they
um,
can answer for this one too.
we could have a whole nother episode on this one too.
Right.
What I would say, and again, this is what I found to be helpful, and it might not be true for everybody, but find the space. Create space. It's been my experience. Again, maybe it's not everyone's. It's been my experience when we're burnt out, it's decision fatigue, it's overwhelming, it's just too much to
Right.
comprehend. And
Mhm.
so I would encourage you to create space, to be alone, to
Mhm.
think, to decompress, to stop making decisions. Um, and I would also say, like, if you are experiencing this, please reach out to me. I would be happy to chat. I crashed and burned real hard in 2021. Um, and I've taken a lot of time to reflect on how it happened and how to try to help other people not have to go through that. Um, but
Yeah.
yeah, I would say create space and don't be afraid to ask for help.
Yeah. I love that. That's great. I was getting ready to say, I think as you kind of think about, I think to me, it sounds like a really good time to stop and do an energy audit and understand like where
Yes.
you're getting energy, what is depleting your energy. I mean, I know for me personally, Julie knows this too, because it's like the first thing I'll do right after a crazy chaotic period is I'm going to the mountains or the woods, somewhere outdoors where there is no Wi-Fi, maybe with my kids, maybe with my husband. Someday I'm just going to go alone at some
Yeah.
point, because there's just something to being out in a space that is wide, that is open, where nobody can really bother me and everything else is away. And sometimes I'll get out there and I'll be thinking, I should be strategizing, but I shouldn't. I really need that time and space to rest and recuperate. And
Yeah.
then when I return, I find that energy and that focus and the ability to then do the work of evaluating my energy, because now I've gained some energy back versus
Yes.
trying to assess your energy when you have zero. It's
Yeah.
just not going to go well.
Well, yes. And I will just add to that. That's exactly what we did at the end of last year. So last year again was really tough on me. And I said to my now husband, I was like, I can't do the holidays this year. I just can't. We have divorced families and everybody is here and we love our families, but I was like, I just can't. And
Mhm.
so we pieced out. We rented a cabin in the middle of nowhere and we spent Christmas by ourselves. And we were there for like a week and we called it our Houdini holiday because we just disappeared. And it was amazing. It was so life-giving. And I will also say that I was like, I'm supposed to find answers. I need to find answers. And I was like, nope, I need to just be. I need to
Yes.
just be and I need to trust the process. And that
Mhm.
week was so healing for me. And I'm not saying I was healed in a week. It still took some time. But yes, and Amy, like there's something about nature and like just being in the middle of nowhere. Um, just trust the process. Don't try to force it. I have to remind myself of that sometimes.
That is a good point as well. I love that. It reminds me also, so we had a Cincinnati Together digital meetup last night, and one of our speakers was talking about career forecast and trends. And a lot of it is a lot of similar topics where we're talking about self-awareness, energy auditing. And then another one that came up was, and some of you maybe heard of this, Rest is Resistance Manifesto. It's a whole book and philosophy from this amazing woman, Trisha Hershey. And I added it to this chat. We'll include it in the show notes. I want to get her in here on the show to talk about this, because I think sometimes we, again, because of conditioning and what society shows us, busy is like a badge of honor, but it's really not. And rest truly is resistance. And we're all, whether you're running your own business or running a household or working or whatever, like you're burnt out for a reason. And we all somehow see rest as something that either we don't deserve, or as it's not productive, or it's counterintuitive, or it's not success. And so I love, love, love how she has kind of worked to disrupt that notion with the Rest is Resistance Manifesto. So you all should check that out for sure. Let's see. The other question that I had for you was, what advice would you give someone who is just starting out on their entrepreneurial journey?
Yeah.
Because we've listening, I feel like, from both sides of things, probably.
Oh yeah. It's been really interesting getting Rain 9 off the ground because I'm like, oh yeah, I remember this is what a startup feels like. Ooh. Well, shameless plug, I would say check out our starter kit. So Rix, RIX starterkit.com. I put this together in 2018 after reflecting on what I wish somebody would have told me in the first 2 years of running Brainchild. I was like, there's just so many moving pieces and there's an order in which you need to do them. And so it's like, I just wish someone would have told me, then I could have just done it, right? Versus figuring it out and then do it. So I would say start there. If anybody's like, yeah, I'm ready to dive all in, again, shameless plug. We are hosting these 3-day defining success workshops, rixworkshops.com. Check it out, because I really believe that like we've launched a number of businesses with clients this year and they're just killing it. But I would say if I'm not going to be part of your journey, which is totally fine, because there's lots of amazing people out there, ask for help. Don't feel like you have to figure this all out on your own, because you're not the first person to start a business.
Surprise.
And you're not going to be the last. So ask for help, because myself and any other entrepreneur that's out there has done this and has gone through some shit and can help you figure out like how to not go through as much pain as they did, And so there's there's a lot of these little things that you can fast track and you can shortcut. And some of them you can't. But
Right.
finding the ones that you can will save you so much time and energy and money and anxiety. If you make that upfront investment in just like asking for the time and asking for the experts to get you there. I mean, honestly, it can save you years and I'm sure arguably hundreds of thousands of dollars eventually, by just asking for help.
I agree. I love that. That's fantastic advice. Ask for help. It's a big philosophy, which is why I feel like we're so in sync with a lot of ideas, philosophies, and missions. And, I love just helping and supporting women, whether they're on an entrepreneurial journey or just life journey, career
Yeah,
journey itself, because, you know, I love that there's this blossoming trend of, especially for women, helping to one, empower other women, but share where they faltered, the systems that have worked for them and things
yeah,
like that. So it's like, even once you're kind of over those hurdles, we're not just moving ahead blindly. We're looking behind us and saying, who needs to come along with me? Who else could learn something from this? And how can I create something that will help her get there? And I can't wait to see more and more and more of that. So I'm so
yeah.
glad that you're doing all the work that you're doing, Kylie. And I'm,
Thank
while
you.
I can totally feel like I have a love-hate with marketing, advertising. It's always been a passion and interest of mine, being somebody who works to support women who work in that space now.
Mhm.
It keeps me close to it, but at that safe, healthy distance. So totally feel and understand how you've made the direction changes and whatnot that you've had. And I just see nothing but really awesome stuff happening for the women's lives that you're able to help and connect with. So make sure that you all connect with Kylie on LinkedIn. We'll drop
Yes,
the link
please.
in the chat here for our live listeners, but then also on link on the show notes. And on that note, with just a few minutes left, I wanted to make sure if we didn't have any questions from our live listening audience, you're welcome to come off of mute. Or if you would rather, because maybe you're slamming a ham sandwich or something, you just want to type an email in or type an email, type a chat question in. Other than that, as we wait to see if there's any other questions, let's see if there's a question I want to go back to. We talked about rope. We talked about so many good things today. I don't know, Kylie, do you feel like there's like
Thank
any
you.
untouched left like pieces of wisdom or advice that you'd want to share
Ooh,
before we? Yeah.
yeah, I do have one if we're waiting to see if there's questions. I will say, throughout my journey, and I'll only speak for myself. I don't think mine's an isolated situation, but throughout my journey, I will say, I think one thing that we need to be mindful of is the impact entrepreneurship has on our significant others.
Oh, that's a great point.
And I don't mean, by no means do I mean like, oh, you should not do this because your significant other feels challenged or what. Like, no, girl, you do you. But because we are whole humans and want relationships in our lives, um, one thing that I've just been really mindful of, and I'm not saying I've done a good job of it, but trying to be better.
Mhm.
Um, there's a lot of times where I feel like I have prioritized my work and my business at the sacrifice of my relationship.
Wow.
Um, and I think, and I don't have kids yet. I hope to someday, but so right now it's just me and my new husband. So I didn't screw up so bad. He still married me, so that was great.
Right? You're doing all right.
Yeah, but I know that it's been a challenge,
Yeah.
at times, and I don't even know like the right way to address it. I just want to call it out because I think,
Oh,
that's one of, if not the most important relationship in our lives is your significant other, and
yes.
just acknowledging that it's a journey for them too.
Mhm.
And I'm not saying you need to compromise yourself at all, but just acknowledge that it impacts them. And I will say, like, he's been so supportive and so proud, and he's wonderful. But I also am trying to make sure that I balance like what's fair,
Mhm.
um, in terms of how I show up in our relationship too.
That is such a great point, and I love that. I think, mine's been kind of the opposite, I feel like, now that you mention it. I was pretty, like, beholden and prioritized work because I felt that pressure, and that I'm really good at being accountable to everybody else but myself kind
Mm,
of a thing. And so when I was working for others, it was like the opposite. It was easy for me to kind of deprioritize our quality time, which is my love language. And time spent with him, which is also high on his list, to when now that I have some autonomy and I'm running my business myself, and he does work from home some as well. He's a professor. I in a weird way, it's brought us closer. In fact, I helped him start an LLC for consulting
that's awesome.
because, but I wouldn't have done any of this if it wouldn't have been for him putting his hands on my shoulders as I was like having a little breakdown. My dog's whining at me. Hey, Leo, you've made an appearance on the podcast. Are you happy now? Go downstairs. Putting his hands on my shoulders and saying, you can do this.
Yeah.
You're not just, you just can't, it's not that you just can't, you can do this. You will do this. Like, this is what you were meant to do. To have that kind of support, I think you do need that. I will say, whether you're in a
Yeah.
relationship or not, whether it's friends, family, you need a soft space to be able to kind of freely share the things that are challenging about taking on
Mhm.
something like this. I would
Yeah.
definitely say, so make sure, I love the advice of ask when you're beginning, ask for help, but also find support. I would want to shout out to for a hot minute, because Tony joined us, Tony Plum, who's a member and city champion for Cincinnati. She helps, like, there's a whole group of entrepreneurs, solopreneurs that have just blossomed into a peer group, and they do masterminds and they do workshops together. And it's just them organically coming together, supporting one another, because again, they need, one, be a space to ask for that help, and
Mhm.
two, space to get the support that you need to make sure that you can get through it. Because it's not just the financial, it's the mental, it's the emotional, it's the
Oh,
physical,
yeah.
all
Oh,
those
for
things.
sure.
So yeah,
Absolutely.
this has been so great. We could keep talking forever. We could probably get together and do another podcast in the new year at some point.
Yeah.
But I hope you all enjoyed, and I hope you are sure to check out all of the amazing resources that Kiley has shared so kindly here today. Thank you so much again for joining us in the podcast. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for having me. Always happy to be a resource.
Awesome. All right. Next week, we are taking a break, all of you, so that we can do what we need to do and rest. For the Thanksgiving holiday. We will be back the week after that. We've got some exciting guests coming up, so be sure to check out the webpage, www.togetherindigital.com/podcasts for all of our upcoming episodes. Until then, everyone, keep asking, keep giving, and keep growing. And I hope to see you all again soon. Thanks.